and 2 years today. This is a child everybody is proud of. We beat our chest about him. We clap about him. My people, you see, on where your mouth is, please put your money goes to a place deeper than you can ever see. Ago, ago, ago. I am no statistician. See how leaders come and go and leave their footprints. My people, we will not wait for it is too late before we start to call our heroes in dirges and in song. Your Excellencies, each one of you has excelled in their field. That is how Africa holds this front line. I see presidents, former presidents. It simply says we keep handing the baton to the front lines and we keep weaving ropes on the ends of old ones, and Africa is sure to work. For a child who will live long needs no child. Ago, ago,
Amen.
ago.
Amen.
Please, in our fashion, when someone has wronged us, we name and shame. My people, it is then in order that when a matter is significant, we abandon our so-called serious shadows and sit in council. We call him guilty, lay his charges, and celebrate him for doing something great. One of us is guilty of greatness. Your Excellency, I will dare to ask, pardon me as a child. If you will give him up, it will make our lives easier. Otherwise, we will have to find his trail, find where he sits. A man can only be as true as his mother tongue. All of Africa, all of the world came to say, Dalu, Dike, Dalu, Odogu, Dalu, Rene. You have done what they said cannot be done. You have made what they said is impossible possible. So Africa can sit at the table of the world, and our reserves are not just in ore, my people. We are the brains that keep the world going. We are the ones that keep our estate in order. I would not like to talk about taps or interventions or how businesses are growing in Africa. I came to talk about dreams. Dreams are the preserve of the chosen. So, Africa, good night. It's still afternoon. This life is a dream, yet our leaders choose to wake up and lend feet to their dreams. My people, we should all go back to bed. Sir, when it is time for you to leave, I have heard of people saying these shoes are too big to fill. Please take your shoes with you, for indeed every traveler deserves his shoes. All of you, welcome to this place where, when we receive visitors, we learn to offer you water. Water for quite a few reasons. Wash your hands of all the sins you might have committed, sir, and wash your feet of all the traveler's dust. Wash your brow of the traveler's heat, and then quench your thirst. Not your thirst for water, but your thirst for knowledge. Every traveler is in search of knowledge, and I know you keep wondering how Africa will look in the next 30, how AFREXIM will look in the next 30. Ago. Ago, ago. My people say a good matter is short. This one has yet to start from the beginning. My people, join me and let us pay homage to whom homage is due. And so, we pay homage to Africa. We pay homage to AFREXIM. We pay homage to the great Professor Benedict Obama. Sir, please, I do not reduce your stature when I call you Orama. I do not reduce your stature when I call you Okechuku. Indeed, you are God's portion that was given to us. That is why we are flourishing. Please, when I ask you to stand, it is out of respect. Earth will receive you gently, sir. When you begin to take your steps, you are writing history we will not forget. When you get to the lectern to speak, we will all keep quiet. And when, no, Your Excellency, with all respect, will you walk to us? Your Excellency, with all respect, the world is here to listen. Ago, ago, ago. Now the accused of greatness defends himself. I will be back.
Thank you very much, Nana. Mark has established the protocol, a very long one for that matter, so I will not repeat myself, except that I must not fail to recognize and thank our President, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, and his spouse, Senator Oluremi Tinubu. I must thank you for the respect to be here today. I must also recognize all the presidents, prime ministers, vice presidents, their representatives who are here with us, as well as the former presidents and prime ministers who have also joined us. I know you took the time to be here because of the work we did with you all through the past 10 years. I must also recognize our shareholders, our board of directors, the honorable ministers who are here, especially the coordinating minister of economy of Nigeria, dear friend Wale, who worked day and night to make this possible. And finally, I must recognize business people who made whatever progress we've achieved possible. And of course, my dear wife, Chinelo, and my daughters who are here with me and with whom I've traveled this journey in good and tough times. And there were real tough times. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, since this is a report card for 10 years of service, I will crave your indulgence to take a few more minutes than usual. It is an immense pleasure to deliver this important speech in this hotel where my AFREXIMBANK journey began. In October 1993, I stepped into the Transcorp Congress Hall just over there and watched with enthusiasm as pioneer shareholders took turns to sign the AFREXIMBANK Charter. Among the important decisions made by shareholders on that day was the appointment of my boss then as the pioneer president, Mr. Christopher Dodu, who is here, and I thank him for being here. AFREXIMBANK shareholders will return to Abuja in 2005 to settle a dispute and voted to appoint Mr. Jean-Louis Ekra as the second president of the bank. I thank him for also being here with us. When shareholders vote later this week to appoint a new president, Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is on that note that I would like to thank His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, the government and the people of Nigeria for hosting the 32nd annual meetings of AFREXIMBANK. For me personally, today's event is epoch-making, as it marks the last time I will be addressing you at the annual meetings of the bank as its president. In June 2015 in Lusaka, Zambia, I had the distinct honor of receiving the unanimous vote of shareholders to become the bank's third president. In my acceptance speech, which I made emotionally because I knew the shareholders took a risk on me, given that I just recovered from a very serious illness. I made a solemn promise to shareholders to, and I quote, to deliver a solid bank that will be a leader among its peers in all measures of financial performance, to quickly grow the capital of the bank in absolute terms, improve capitalization, through innovative capital management initiatives, ensure first-class risk management, and achieve adequate returns to shareholders. I said then that we will build risk buffers that will adequately protect the bank as it intervenes in difficult markets. In terms of development focus, I said that I could, that will give priority to interventions that will have the broadest development impact. Promotion of intra-African trade will therefore be a priority as it will improve Africa's dynamic comparative advantage in the export of light manufactures. I emphasize that we will give priority to the financing and promotion of high-value exports that have the capability of stabilizing export revenues and creating jobs. That we will aim to support the creation of commercially viable medical centers of excellence so that never again will hundreds of thousands of Africans die. As to my personal commitment, I stressed on that occasion that there will be no sacrifice too great for me to make for a bank that saved my life. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I stand before you most pleased and fulfilled that I kept my promises. I gave the job the best. As a result, between 2020, the UNSAC invested approximately $120 billion in Africa and the Caribbean, and $150 billion in the 10 years I was president. These must rank among the highest by any standards. And the fact that we invested $150 billion and have a capital of $43 billion tells you that Africans pay their debt. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we have collectively over the past decade built a solid financial institution that is good for global Africa. Total assets and guarantees grew more than eightfold between September 2015 and April 2025 to reach $43.5 billion. Total revenues also rose sevenfold, reaching $3.24 billion from $408 million in 2015. Net income amounted to about $1 billion last year, about 700% increase from the level of $125 million in 2015. Internal capital generation and very strong support from shareholders through significant additional equity investments saw shareholders' funds rise from about $1 billion in September 2015 to $7.5 billion in April 2025. With callable capital reaching $4.5 billion from $450 million in September 2015. Liquidity remained very strong, with sources of funding much more diversified in 2024 than in 2015, due to the activities of the African Resource Mobilization Unit, which we created in 2016, and which saw the share of African sources of funding rise from just about 11% in 2015 to almost at 7% in May 2025. At group level, the Fund for Export Development in Africa and the AFREXIMBANK, our insurance management subsidiary, started making significant contributions to profit and growing in scope and depth. Beyond profits, these subsidiaries have also started fulfilling their mandate with further investing equity in various sectors across 13 countries, including technology, creative industry, industrial infrastructure, financial institutions, energy, and so on. Despite the challenging operating environment, the bank group was able to continue with the tradition of returning value to shareholders through annual dividends distribution. Aggregate dividends payments from 2015 to 2024 reached $1.35 billion. I must, at this juncture, thank shareholders once again for a significant reinvestment of these dividends, with 50 to 70% of the dividends reinvested annually throughout that period. A strong vote of confidence in your bank and management. Today, AFREXIMBANK has become the trusted institution for mitigating the adverse impact of economic shocks and the primary source of vital medium to long-term financing for the African private sector and critical sectors of the African economy. It is important to note that this trajectory of growth and relevance did not start with me, but goes back to my predecessors who grew the bank multiple folds from where they took it. That's why, as I look ahead, I see the bank at no less than $250 billion in total assets and guarantees in 10 years, when my successor will be stepping down. I have no doubt that we would see that even better, given the strength, depth, and scope of the bank group today. And we must support and work towards the attainment of this vision, because it is by our owning and controlling a bank of that size that Africa can hope to escape from the shame of poverty and underdevelopment. Your Excellency, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the strategy when I took office was to help the continent to navigate transitory economic shocks while driving development through the promotion, facilitation, and financing of intra-African trade and investment, and pursuing export-led industrialization. For instance, during the commodity price shock of 2015 and 2016, AFREXIMBANK disbursed about $10 billion, which supported many African economies, including Nigeria, Egypt, and Ghana, to meet accumulated trade debt payment obligations, while reducing the impact of the crisis on their foreign exchange markets. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the challenge presented in multiple forms, ranging from an increased backlog of trade debt payments that fell due, lack of access to the COVID-19 containment materials, and lack of funding for fertilizers and food imports. With no help in sight from traditional sources, African Union sought the support of AFREXIMBANK. We worked with Mr. Striber Silva, African CDC, and UNECA to set up the African Medical Supplies Platform, a digital platform that we use to achieve pooled procurement of personal protective equipment, test kits, and therapeutics on behalf of African and Caribbean states. We supported the central and commercial banks of many African states to continue trade debt payments and to open letters of credit for critical imports. During the period, the bank disbursed about $8 billion in support of Africa. And when the COVID-19 vaccines arrived and there was no financing available, AFREXIMBANK came to the rescue and provided $2 billion facility, which made it possible for Africa and the CARICOM economies to achieve a pooled procurement of 400 million doses of Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccines. The first ever pooled procurement of such a magnitude ever. And as the COVID-19 pandemic faded, the Ukraine crisis emerged in early 2022. Africa was again finding it hard to access grains, fertilizers, and petroleum products. AFREXIMBANK stepped in and disbursed an amount of $50 billion between 2022 and 2023 to support African economies to diversify sourcing and develop internal capacities, including helping to fast-track petroleum refineries and fertilizer production projects to reduce dependence on Black Sea supplies. And with the debt crisis, many African economies lost international payment services and credit lines. In response, we expanded our payment services and letter of credit offerings. Since the launch of our foreign currency payments have been processed for banks and corporates in 61 African and Caribbean countries. We have facilitated for corporates and banks in over 30 countries. And just last week, AFREXIMBANK became a direct participant in the cross-border interbank payment system, making it possible for the bank to support renminbi payments, which is expected to boost Africa's exports under the duty-free concessions granted to Africa by China. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, despite these short-term crisis interventions, we remain focused on our long-term objective of making Africa resilient and prosperous. I feel fulfilled that we have been able to help deliver on the aspirations set out in the 1963 resolution of the founders of the Organization of African Unity, where they said that they will set up a continental free trade area, set up transit facilities, and also set up African trade fairs. They also said they will set up what they then called African Payment Union. Until we joined forces, these laudable goals remained on the shelf for 60 years. Since the 1960s, when most African countries gained independence, they have followed the so-called international best practice as defined by others in managing their economies. Today, that international best practice has kept our people and economies where we were 60 years ago. We have nothing to show for it. We remain fragmented, atomistic economies that do not trade with one another as we were 60 years ago. We remain raw commodity exporters, with these commodities largely being traded by others, not us, as we were 60 years ago. We remain the poorest economies on earth, worse than we were 60 years ago. My approach at AFREXIMBANK has been to find an alternative best practice. We call that the African best practice. And this is because we realized that there was no common denominator practice that propelled the high-performing economies of the world. Each great nation shaped its own destiny. And for us, the African best practice means that an institution like ours must understand the power of capital owned and controlled by Africans in unlocking Africa's development and use it boldly and with courage and expertise to support and daring and not be held down by a debilitating paralysis of the will. And I dare say that it is because of the adoption of African best practice that we've been able to accomplish some of the modest accomplishments to our credit. That was why when others could not, we were able to directly and indirectly support the Dangote refinery and petrochemical industry in an amount of about $4 billion, which then made it possible for it to be completed quickly. That complex, now operational, is helping to cut petroleum imports into Nigeria by between $10 to $12 billion annually. It's also increasing value-added exports out of Nigeria. For the first time, Nigeria started exporting refined petroleum products. It never happened before. And that is why when Tanzania decided to solve its energy problem and wanted to develop the refugee dam called the Nyerere Dam today, and could not find support because no bank was willing to support them. AFREXIMBANK worked with them and the Egyptian government to arrange a $2.9 billion credit facility from entirely within Africa to support Arab contractors at SWD Electric, both of Egypt to execute that project that will provide 2.1 gigawatt of electricity to Tanzania. I thank the Vice President here for support and for the belief in us. It wasn't easy, but happy it was done. That was why when Ghana was in dire need of support to enable it to access IMF facility and restructure its debt, AFREXIMBANK stepped in with $750 million facility, and today Ghana is not a basket case many people thought it would be, it's actually on recovery path. And that is why your bank is razor focused on promoting intra-African trade and African Continental Free Trade Agreement implementation. The AFREXIMBANK and AFCFTA Secretariat, under the able leadership of His Excellency Juan Kelemene, fully understand that a trade agreement without a solid financial backing will soon run out of steam. Accordingly, we have worked very, very closely together to ensure the full implementation of the AFCFTA. Permit me to outline a few of what we have been doing. One of the greatest barriers to intra-African trade has been the lack of efficient cross-border payment systems, which have created leakages of around $5 billion annually. The Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, championed by AFREXIMBANK, in partnership with the AFCFTA Secretariat and African Union Commission, is integrating the 42 payment systems that exist in Africa, enabling real-time payments in local currencies. PAPS eliminates the need for currency conversion through external intermediaries, saving billions of transaction costs for Africa. The system is supported by a $3 billion clearing and settlement fund from AFREXIMBANK. PAPS has onboarded about 160 commercial banks and operates today in 16 countries, with many more underway and being integrated. PAPS is now beginning to gradually deliver on its fundamental purpose of serving as the continental payment rail that will foster innovation and overall continental payment efficiency. In this regard, an African currency marketplace was also launched under PAPS and is now fully operational. This marketplace allows for trading of African currencies, creating a window for the repatriation of trapped funds in different African countries. And today, we launched the PAPS credit and debit card in partnership with Mercury and Discover. Holders of this card, and I must thank the excellencies who received the card, you can use this card and pay for any expenses in your national currency in the 16 African countries where PAPS is enabled today. With PAPS, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we have opened many possibilities. For instance, we can bring more liquidity to our capital markets as it will enable an Egyptian to buy stocks on the Nigerian Stock Exchange using Egyptian pounds. It will enable a Kenyan entity to issue bonds listed on the Nairobi Stock Exchange, and the Ghanaian can invest in it using Ghana cedis. Gradually, we will achieve convergence in our capital and financial markets and pave the way for a single currency one day in the future. We thank the 16 countries that have connected to PAPS and are driving its phenomenal money. 2 weeks ago, CARICOM central banks endorsed PAPS for use in the implementation of the CARICOM payment system. We hope that a successful implementation of the mandate will also pave the way for integration of CARICOM and African payment systems, bringing our people closer together after so many years. Last year, we celebrated a significant milestone with the formal launch of the AFCFTA Adjustment Funds operations in Kigali, Rwanda. This landmark initiative underscores AFREXIMBANK's commitment to ensuring the equitable distribution of benefits for the AFCFTA while addressing the challenges of transition to a tariff-free trade. The fund is value finance that can power intra-African trade. We have over the past 10 years expanded financing of intra-African trade, raising the intra-African trade financial of the bank's total loans to 32% from 3% 10 years ago. We have made sure that almost all African countries have access to trade and payment services lines to be able to conduct intra-African trade. And we are glad that thanks to this effort and to PAPS, we are beginning to see letters of credit being issued in African currencies. AFREXIMBANK has also led the effort in addressing the challenges arising from the colonial legacy of fragmentation of the continent into 55 atomistic countries, bounded by 110 borders, within which there are 16 land-linked countries. For years, it took days and cost significant sums of money for goods to cross multiple borders, as shippers must post transit bonds and guarantees at each border crossing. Today, we are putting this absurdity behind us. Working with the AFCFTA Secretariat and the Commercial Secretariat, as well as the African Union Commission, we have launched the Africa Collaborative Transit Guarantee Scheme that makes it possible for a single transit bond issued by AFREXIMBANK, either directly or through a partnership, to facilitate the movement of goods from Cape to Cairo without stopping at the over 9 borders such a good must cross. Currently fully operational in the commercial region, where bonds approaching $1 billion have been issued. We expect to expand the scheme to other parts of Africa and thank the Commercial Secretariat for their partnership. We also thank ZEPRI, the Commercial Reinsurance Institution, for their partnership in establishing the Trans-Africa Border Alliance, a joint venture that is accelerating our intervention in this space. Your Excellencies, colonialism also foisted on us the legacy of 55 countries with 55 standards in almost everything. There's little hope of conducting efficient inter-African trade under such conditions. According to AFREXIMBANK, in collaboration with Africa Regional Standards Organization, launched an initiative to rapidly harmonize standards across the continent. Using grant funding provided by AFREXIMBANK and mobilized by the bank from its partners, the ASO has been able to harmonize a total of 486 standards in automotives, textiles, leather, pharmaceuticals and medical equipment, as well as in gastronomy and food services. And work is ongoing to harmonize 402 additional standards. We're also actively developing testing and certification infrastructure across Africa to ensure that all African countries have the capacity to test and certify tradable products. Because one thing is to harmonize standards, the another is to be able to implement it. Our pilot African Quality Assurance Center is already operational in Ogun State, Nigeria, and others are in progress in Benin Republic and Chad, while discussions have advanced in Kenya and Zimbabwe. We are gradually getting to that day when all product testings will happen on the continent and no longer abroad. While we recognize the importance of the foregoing interventions, we remain mindful that perhaps the greatest obstacle to boosting intra-African trade and AFCFTA implementation is because of severe limited access to trade and investment information. That is why South Africa imposed leather further prepared after turning from India at a price which is double the price at which Ethiopia exports the input to the world. That is why Kenya imports raw hides from New Zealand, while Burundi next door exports the same to the world at a much lower price. To begin to correct these absurdities, AFREXIMBANK launched the Biennial Intra-African Trade Fair, in collaboration with African Union Commission and the AFCFTA Secretariat. Since 2018, when it was launched in Cairo, 2 more editions have been held in Durban in 2021 and Cairo in 2023. The 4th edition is scheduled to hold in Algiers, Algeria, during September 4 to 10 this year, and we are all invited. Since inception, the trade fair has evolved to become the AFCFTA marketplace, having attracted an aggregate of over 70,000 visitors, 4,500 exhibitors, and $100 billion in deals. We invite everyone to join us and take advantage of this opportunity in a few weeks' time. We've also attacked the trade information gap using digital artificial intelligence-enabled technologies. African Trade Gateway is a digital ecosystem that encompasses a suite of digital products that facilitate trade and investments. While these are offered directly and through our partner banks, they represent a key offering in AFREXIMBANK Africa Trade Centers being developed by the bank directly and through franchising across Africa. The Africa Trade Center Abuja is located in just a few minutes from here, and you are invited to go and visit it. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the area of political and business leaders who have joined us from the Caribbean speak volumes regarding the progress we have made with our outreach to our friends, brothers, and sisters in the CARICOM. Over the past 4 years, we have significantly advanced commercial and cultural linkages within global Africa. Our successful outreach within Caribbean has led to 12 CARICOM states becoming partner members of the bank, with the 13th scheduled to join next week. The establishment of him for the construction of the bank's Africa Trade Center in the region have all taken place in this short period. Other notable achievements include the establishment of the Africa Caribbean Business Council and the launch of the Africa Caribbean Trade and Investment Forum in 2022. In 2023, with this year's edition scheduled to take place in St. George's, Grenada, from July 28 to 29, 2025. You also all invest there. On the business front, the bank has also approved and this bank is also ability for ladies and gentlemen, industrialization remains a cornerstone vital to the realization of the goals of the AFCFTA, industrial infrastructure across Africa. The bank had a RISE integrated industrial platform jointly owned by the bank, AFC and Equity, Cote d'Ivoire, Gabon, Nigeria, Rwanda, Tanzania, Gabon, Nigeria, Rwanda, Tanzania, Togo, and it's at various stages of developing others in Angola. The investments by the bank since 2011, the agro-allied hubs and logistics facilities. In July this year, we will break ground 1,000 workers. This will be one of the very large textile facilities being developed under a $5 billion partnership